Okay. Question one. Where are you from? Can you talk about your family background a little bit? And where did you go to school before attending IUP?
So I'm from Clymer, PA. It's about 20 minutes outside of Indiana. Um, it's a small little like one stoplight town, very like tiny, really rural. Um, my high school is Penns Manor, which is also like 20 minutes outside of Indiana, but it's a really like urban, not urban, rural school. Excuse me. Very tiny, like maybe like 500 students total. Like my graduating class was 62. Um, and we're right between two cornfields. So if that gives you an idea of the kind of environment my high school was in. So like very small town, like kind of really football, like kind of oriented, that kind of thing. Um, my family's probably like middle class, I guess. Kind of normal family dynamic. Um, I have one brother, one older sister, and one younger sister. So I'm the third child. Um, and I'm the second, or no, not second, third kid. Both my older siblings went to college. Um, but they moved away to college. I stayed home. So, yeah, that's about it, I guess.
Yes, I very much relate to rural schools and football.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, I didn't play football necessarily, so it wasn't like something I was very interested in. Like,
Hmm.
like I ran cross country and track, and those are not sports that really matter as much to a small rural school. So that was interesting, I guess.
So question two. Why did you decide to stay home and attend IUP?
Um, it's kind of I don't really know is the problem because I didn't necessarily want to go to college, but I knew that it's you kind of have to, and I didn't really know what I want to do, and I don't necessarily still know what I want to do. So it was more of like kind of taking away one other variable of like change, I guess, of like moving away. I mean, I could have, I just didn't. Also, it saves a little money, so I wasn't like, yeah. And I was more like, I knew a couple, well, most of the people that went to college from my high school ended up going to IUP, and I always said I was never going to be one of those people. But here I am. So it was just more of like a convenience thing, probably, I guess. But yeah, that's about it.
Question three. What do you want to do immediately after graduating IUP? And what are your career goals? If you can actually
Um,
answer those questions.
yeah, I mean, I can. I would say finding a job would be pretty nice. That's a goal. I think I'm currently an SSED major, and I think I'm going to end up switching to actually what you're doing, which is doubling in history and archaeology. Um, I don't know what everything going to end up doing with that necessarily. I think working in a museum would be pretty cool, or eventually maybe like teaching at a college. But that's a lot of work. So I'm not really sure. I mean, I think like a dream job would be like working at the Smithsonian, but those jobs are very, 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 very hard to come by. So I guess that's the big overarching goal. But I would like to be employed is the main one. Pay off that student debt.
I empathize in almost all of that.
Yeah, it's a rough time.
All right, next question. When and how did you first become aware of the COVID-19 outbreak, and what was your reaction?
Um, I don't. remember I think probably around when everyone else did, like February-ish, like middle of February probably. But at the time, at least how the news was talking about it, it wasn't like the big deal that it was yet. It was more like it was a far off issue. Like it's not ever going to matter to us. It'll be fine. When it really started to impact like my life specifically was after we went off on spring break. I had planned to go to Florida because my aunt and uncle lived down there for a spring break with my girlfriend at the time. So, and I was kind of concerned whether or not I should go because of the numbers. It had reached the US at this point, and everyone was saying it was fine and all this, and I kind of knew it really wasn't. So I was really concerned about one, flying, and two, going to Florida because there were just a couple cases announced near the area that my aunt and uncle lived. But I ended up going, and we really didn't like go anywhere, so we were fine. But when we returned home, that's when IUP did. We went all remote learning and all of that, which really kind of like affected a lot of things. So I think my how I thought about it really like rapidly changed in like a span of a week. So like I was kind of in the sense of I'm not too worried about it, and then it like very quickly like, oh, this is a big deal very quickly. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's how a lot of us were when they decided to go remote and stuff like that. So, um, yeah, stuff changed pretty quick.
Yeah, it did. And like I was a second semester freshman. I was like, oh, okay, we're doing this now. Because that was like my first like real like college experience, and then oh boy, we're everything has changed very drastically, and a lot of things are happening.
Yeah, it's definitely put a lot of things on hold, I think. All right, so my next question is have you or anyone you know tested positive for COVID-19? And in what ways do you think testing positive for the virus would affect your life personally?
Well, I never actually got tested, but my girlfriend works at a law firm in Indiana, and one of her coworkers tested positive. So she decided to get a test, and she was positive. And I talked to my doctor, and he's like, "Don't even waste a test. You're gonna test positive. You need to quarantine for 2 weeks." So it didn't necessarily affect my life that much because I don't work right now. So, and I wasn't doing very much anyway besides staying home and like going to class. So it didn't necessarily affect anything really. I mean, that was at like the beginning of the semester though. Um, it probably affected my girlfriend's life more because she has like car payments and all that stuff, and she couldn't work anymore for 2 weeks. And getting all that unemployment stuff has been really hard during like this time because the offices are swamped. But it was I didn't have any symptoms really. It was more like mild like allergy, like kind of that stuff. So it didn't necessarily like really I was probably asymptomatic, so it really didn't like affect me. But it wasn't necessarily the most pleasant experience. It's kind of scary because like thousands of people have died and you're like, ooh, this is a little nerve wracking, even though you're not really like a high risk age group, it's still not a pleasant experience to have. But it, overall, I was not very affected. Like there are people who have had much more like traumatic experiences than I have.
Yeah, I have no doubt that that'll be a scary thing to encounter.
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily worried so much about myself, more like my parents, they're a little older, like mid 50s, like so worried about them. And like I've intermittently seen my grandparents during all of this, even though I probably shouldn't have. So I was worried about that too, because they're older and they have all of the pre-existing conditions that really amplify it. So that was where my worries mostly were. but everything turned out for the most part okay, I guess. No one's really got it, so I guess it worked out pretty well. And now I guess I have the antibodies. Whether or not those will actually help is besides the point, but
So kind of going from that, um, I kind of asked, if it affected you personally. Did that time, has all of this impacted your career goals or relationships with anyone?
um, not necessarily my career goals because those are still kind of up in the air, but relationships, um, I would say probably kind of because like very like confined space with like my family all the time. I mean, it's usually how we are, but not to this extent kind of thing. So that's kind of sometimes put strains on things because people are stressed out and all that stuff. Um, with my friends, I guess I don't really see them super often anyway, so that wasn't the biggest of deals. And I guess with my girlfriend, it was just not seeing each other for a 2 week period, which it's been a long time since that's happened, since she probably went away for college. So that's like, I guess, the extent of how my relationships have changed.
How has the pandemic impacted your undergraduate experience at IUP?
It's interesting to say the least, I guess. Uh, it's very quick and abrupt change, and I was just kind of like settling in. I'm like, oh, I can do this. It's not too bad. And then everything changed very quickly. Um, it's not. I was never like one. I didn't stay on campus very often because, like, to do really anything, I have to drive back in, which is a hassle. So I didn't like really like get into like college experience. Like I joined a couple clubs, but um, so it hasn't really affected like the social aspect of college for me really because one, I don't really have that many college friends, and two, like I don't do anything on campus. So that wasn't a big deal. It's more the like really drastic change on how academics work now because of how everything's set up. And personally, I think asynchronous classes are a nightmare, but asynchronous math classes are a nightmare. But other than that, um, it hasn't really affected me that much because I know there are a lot more people who are a lot more involved in like campus life than I am. So I would say I'm probably like very like moderately affected at best compared to other people who like live on campus and are really involved in clubs and stuff. And yeah, I don't really do majority of that, so I wasn't too affected.
Yeah, I know. At least I, for one, I don't enjoy asynchronous either. I know a lot of my classmates don't. Um, and and as you said, I couldn't imagine doing a math class via asynchronous. I took one. I had to. Um, it was a stat class. I got the A.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't care for it even in person. So I mean, doing it via Zoom, I can't even imagine how difficult that is.
Yeah, I'm taking stats right now. It's a nightmare. It's really bad. I mean, I'm doing better than I expected, but I cannot teach myself how to do that. So I'm gonna have to figure that problem out here soon.
So kind of getting away from school, a little more focus on United States overall.
Mm.
Uh, what is your opinion of the United States' handling of the COVID-19 pandemic? And do you think there are things that could have been done better to lessen the number of cases in the United States earlier?
Um, Without getting like super political, because that's never a fun time for anybody, but I think we could have done a lot better in a lot of different circumstances, just because of how not even with the government, just how downplayed it was in the news for so long, and nobody was worried about it until it was almost too late. Because America kind of has the mindset of we're the best and nothing can ever affect us, kind of thing. So that was kind of really detrimental, I at least personally think. And we didn't do enough quick enough, and we're still really not doing enough because I think testing's really important and it's not really been like pushed as much as it should have. And to my knowledge, we're still the highest grossing country, I believe. I'm not sure if that's correct. So, but with caseloads and all this, I think we could have done a lot better. But to be fair, it's a very difficult circumstance, I guess. But that's still not an excuse for where we are because nothing's really been done to fix the problem, at least from my point of view. So, like, I don't I don't have the answers, obviously, but I just think we've kind of I think we're almost moved to the point where it's old news and like it's just gonna be around forever, which is concerning. But I mean, what can we really do? I guess.
Yeah, no, I agree with a lot of what you said. It's a lot of good points. Are you optimistic about the chances of an effective vaccine being produced in the near future?
I would love to say yes. I am not at all. I'm not an optimistic person, very really. Um, I had some hope with some of the like studies that were doing well for a while, like Oxford, I think, was doing pretty well. The problem with the vaccine, I think, is that we have the whole anti-vax movement kind of thing, which is going to be a problem. Also, from the very, I don't have these are just my opinions, so I do not know these for facts, but from what I've heard, like the vaccine's only going to like be moderately helpful kind of thing because it's a virus and it like different strands, so kind of how the flu operates, but not the flu at all. Like a different strand will be different, and the virus vaccine won't help that. So that's kind of my understanding. So I'm not very optimistic. I would really much like to have one as quickly as we possibly can, safely, but I'm not convinced that it will wipe out the virus completely ever. I think it's more once we learn about it more, we'll be able to get it under control and it'll just become like more of like a seasonal type thing, maybe. But I also do not know that for sure. It's kind of where
Yeah,
I am right now.
from what I've read, yeah, it's probably going to be here for the long term, and especially if, like you said, if the anti-vaccine movement really makes its voice heard in this scenario,
Unfortunately, yeah,
um, that it's almost going to be completely rendered ineffective if not everyone's going to follow through.
yeah,
So that's going to be another thing to overcome once we finally get to that point.
yeah. Oh, it's all a mess.
So kind of on par with this, has the pandemic impacted your perspective on American society? If so, in what ways?
Um, yeah, I would say that we just kind of want to do what we want when we want to do it, I guess, because um, not everybody, obviously, but a lot of people just kind of brushed it off and didn't really take it seriously. And now we're kind of in the situation we are now. And like lockdown was this big whole thing for like a couple months, and now it's everything's out, and like we're back to trying to get back to normal life, which isn't being very effective in slowing the spread of the virus at all. And I think we as a society have kind of um, moved on almost, and we're like, we've just decided that we don't care anymore about like lockdowns and all of this. We want to go back to how things used to be, even though I don't know if that's ever going to happen, is the thing. So I think it's kind of, I don't want to say negative, but it's given me more of a negative view, is the best word I can think of how our society operates. I guess. So it's, yeah.
All right, to kind of get away from American society now, like the
Mhm.
whole big picture, what was life like for you and your family during quarantine? Was there anything that you were looking forward to that you missed out on because of the pandemic?
Um, I would say our quarantine life was actually pretty good. My family's pretty close, so it wasn't like the biggest adjustment. Um, and like I did a lot of fun things in quarantine with my family. Like I finally watched the Harry Potter movies and stuff like that. And we like did activities like we made like mini golf courses and stuff in our house. So like we did fun things. I think it was nice to have that time because otherwise I would never have had that with my family. What was the second part of your question?
Was there anything that you were looking forward to that you missed out on because of the pandemic?
Right. Um, I think just like activities that involved like larger groups of people, like just like being able to go places, I guess is what I missed out. I don't have any like big picture things that really like a concert or anything I want to go to. Like just being able to like walk somewhere outside in a store or something and not be worried about catching a deadly disease kind of thing is more stuff that I missed out on. Um, Also, kind of like a little bit of the like quote unquote college experience, even though I'm not like super involved in a lot of things. I think it's a lot different, and I kind of preferred it a different way, but we're kind of here. So I guess really just difference in like how my college life works is like the biggest like thing I've missed out on, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's how, especially students who aren't upperclassmen,
Mm.
um, they're very upset by the fact that I mean, it's nothing anybody can control, but it is kind of a it's a not a great scenario when you have to
Yeah,
miss vital in-person time, and that's time you can't really get back. So
yeah.
I get that. So while in quarantine, did you pick up any hobbies? And if so, what were they and how did you get into them?
Um, I would like to say I did more stuff in quarantine than I really did, like progress wise and stuff I wanted to do. Um, I played a lot of video games, which is unfortunate because I could have been doing much more like fun and informative things for myself. Um, Read a lot. Um, I've been trying to get into blacksmithing for a long time, so I've made some progress on that, but not super a lot. But as hobbies go, not I haven't really picked up anything like super new. Just kind of sat around, which is unfortunate because I just had like 3 months of free time that I just kind of wasted. But it's whatever. What's done is done.
I'm kind of in the same boat with you there. Um, my last question is there anything else you would like to share with me?
Um, I don't know. Just that I think we're in a very like pivotal point in not just American history but like world history because I think things are drastically going to change just because of everything. So I actually did going back to hobbies. I meant to keep a journal of like stuff that was happening because I'm a historian, like whatever. I probably should have done that. I never did. I really should have, but like I regret it looking back on it because this is probably the most extraordinary event that's going to happen in my lifetime. I mean, I hope to God that it's the most extraordinary event. I can't handle any more big scale events, but I think things are never ever going to be the same. So I just yeah, I kind of not necessarily looking forward to, but kind of concerned on what the future holds for the world.
Okay. Well, you basically knocked out all my questions. So,
All right. Pause the recording quick and then start back up with mine. All right. So I think I have around 20 questions, maybe a little more, a little less, but similar to how you started. Where did you grow up? Um, what was your like school life like family dynamic, that kind of stuff?
so I was born in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, about 45 minutes outside of Philadelphia. But I was raised in Mountaintop, PA, which is where my mother grew up. My grandmother grew up. I have a lot of family in Mountaintop, Pennsylvania. It's in Northeast PA, about 20 minutes outside Wilkes-Barre. Um, I went to school at Crestwood High School. It's a like a rural community. Um, big football school. It's like our primary sport, like most Pennsylvania schools. Um, in terms of family dynamic, I have two parents and two siblings, a brother and sister. We're all pretty close. We get along really well. Um, yeah, just average middle class family, I'd say.
Okay. So what made you choose IUP?
The archaeology program is probably the number one reason I chose to go there. I knew that's kind of one that I wanted to do since I was little. I saw Indiana Jones and I was like, I want to do that. That looks awesome. Come to find out, I mean, in archaeology is nothing like that now. It's
Yeah.
a very scientific, very methodological way of going about studying artifacts. But I do enjoy it. So yeah, primarily I chose IUP for the program.
Okay. So moving away a little bit from like school life, I guess. Um, what were your feelings when COVID-19 was first highlighted in the media? Like, how did you feel about? Did you feel that you would necessarily be affected personally?
So I'll start off with just kind of telling you how I heard about it. I was on campus. It was I think it was like February, maybe early March. I was with a friend who was doing research about the COVID-19, which to that point I had not heard anything about it. I was not really aware that it was in the thing or in the media, because normally when I'm at school, I'm very much all work and don't really devote that much time to watching the news. So I heard that she was, talking about this and this virus, and that's how I kind of became aware that it was a thing. Um, so to get back to your question, um, which would you mind repeating, just so I don't venture off
Yeah.
too fast off it?
So, well, not necessarily since you didn't hear about it in the media, but what were your feelings when you first like heard about it?
Okay.
Yeah.
So when I heard about it, I was definitely I was slightly concerned, but I was kind of in the hopes that it would just remain not not where we were, that it would remain, in Asia, or it would spread to Europe, but it wouldn't get to North America. So I like when I first heard it, I was like, I'm optimistic we'll be okay. It might just maybe it'll remain an epidemic, and not spread to as far as it did.
Yeah, I feel like that was how a lot of people reacted to that. I did specifically too. But, so um, you didn't necessarily think it would directly affect you. You were hopeful that it would stay out of like reach, kind of thing, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So getting more into like big picture stuff. Um, what are your feelings about how the U.S. response to the pandemic and like how it was handled and where we are today, I guess?
I I think it was handled terribly. It would the leadership was not decisive enough to actually slow this thing down. A lot could have been done. Um, I mean, we can throw out, it's fair to say this is something that only comes around like maybe every 100 years. So no matter how much preparation you can take, it's going to be a challenge. That being said, there was a lot that could have been done to minimize the amount of impact that it's had on our country. Um, yeah, I really think a lot more could have been done, a lot more should have been done, but it we've been led to where we are now, which is like the leading nation in terms of cases and deaths. So
Um, do you think how we handled the virus um, kind of put America in like a bad light on the global scale?
I definitely do. Um, I read a New York Times article the other day or something that it kind of just encapsulated how different people in different nations are looking at the United States right now. Like they're scholars from universities across the world, and one of them said it's like watching the Roman Empire fall. Which I really took something away from that. It's like it's clearly we are seen as the last superpower, whatever that means. And I think th- this virus has it's not the direct reason that we're this nation is kind of crumbling, but it's had a lot of impact, I think, um, as a source of the nation kind of being exposed to um, not being this great place as we often describe it as to people who aren't from here. So I think it's definitely put us in a bad light, and I'm not sure we as a nation can ever really recover. So
Yeah, I think your point about like comparing it to the fall of Rome, like really, it really resonates with me on how things have been like declining for a while now. But yeah, that was a really interesting point you made. So kind of coming back a little bit to like school, how was the how has COVID-19 like directly affected your school life?
so so before we decided to go remote or had to go remote, um, I was volunteering at a exhibit in the library, which would have been good for a resume. I was doing work at the Genealogical Society for another public history course, which again, great for my resume. And I also had field school lined up for this summer, which is a very important in being an archaeologist because it exposes you to all kinds of things that you're going to be doing in the field. It really helps you determine if you want to choose this as your career path. All of that is gone. I didn't get a chance to finish my work at the Genealogical Society or at the library. Field school had to be pushed to next summer, so a lot of it's drastically impacted my academic career. It's forced me to change a lot of things around, and I'm not sure how a lot of it's actually going to work out because of this. Um, but I'm hopeful that I'll be able to figure it out and get some more things on a resume to get into a grad school somewhere. So
So you think that um, this is going to have like a long-lasting effect on your career?
I definitely think so.
Yeah, I feel like that's what a lot of people like the problem a lot of people have, especially like you're an upperclassman. Like I'm not as affected as much because I like lower classmen, but like that would be a very scary place to be because all of these things that need to get done just couldn't happen. So how has the virus affected like friends, loved ones, and how and like in what ways?
So luckily, nobody in my family has tested positive. Um, However, it has had its impact. My father did lose his job as a result of this virus, which was rather surprising to all of us considering he worked for EBSCO, which is designed to help students work online. So it was a very strange let go. But since then, he has gotten another job, and everything's fine now. Thank goodness. But um, in terms of jobs, it's definitely impacted my family. Um, Not necessarily in terms of health, but that being said, I do have grandparents who are all at risk, so they have to be much more careful now. They can't really leave their house as much as they used to. Sometimes we have to go shopping for them. So there's been a lot of both direct and indirect impacts, I would say.
Yeah, unfortunately, my grandparents don't tend to listen, so they just go trouncing about wherever they want to, and that's not ideal. Yeah, like losing jobs, like especially like you said, your dad's job that was like meant to be online, that's really unexpected, scary, and yeah. So more to you personally, um, besides like school, how has COVID affected you like directly?
I've so I did have make a few friends at school in my time at IUP. It's made it almost impossible to see them because I don't live anywhere near there. Whereas a lot of students who go to IUP live in the area, so it's really kind of hindered my ability to go see people. Um, just because it's a 3.5 hour drive, it's not really feasible. It's hard to stop places because you're afraid of getting sick. So we're kind of reduced to using social media and other platforms to kind of stay connected. Um, yeah, it's really forced me to kind of take time for myself, and find other means of reaching out to people.
Yeah, I can really not so much empathize with that, but I can see how difficult that would be. Um, has COVID-19 changed how you view the world, like politically, socially, all of that kind of stuff?
I would say it's definitely changed how I see the world. Not definitely politically. That's very apparent. I think in today's politics, how polarized we are now. Everyone's taking sides, and you can tell, who's trying to fight for the right thing and who's maybe kind of more invested in themselves, their own personal interests. It's definitely kind of changed how I see the world morally. I think a lot of this it's no longer a political issue. It's definitely, at least from my understandings of how I see things, it's a moral issue of whether or not you're willing to commit to our nation's ideals and do the right thing, or do what you want because you have the rights to do what you want. Um, so it's definitely made me aware that not everyone shares my morals, or a lot of the morals that I think people should be raised on.
Yeah, I think you could debate for hours about the moral implications of what's happened and how contradictory some of what stuff is happening is to what the country was built on. Um, did you know anybody personally who has tested positive for the virus?
So I haven't talked to him recently. I talk to him about maybe once a year, both around our birthdays. We kind of reach out to each other and catch up. He was an old football friend, that I played with, and he moved before we got to high school, to uh, Singapore. He moved to Singapore. Um, but since then, we've kind of stayed in touch, and like I said, we reach out to like each other maybe twice a year. But he did catch the virus. Um, he's a very social person, so I'm not necessarily surprised that he caught it, but he did. Um, and he said it's very lethargic and tired, and it's almost like the flu, but it makes it really hard to breathe. All the common symptoms.
Mm.
As far as I can remember, he's the only person I know who's caught it. that has had like that much of a direct impact on him. Um, I do know his family had to they couldn't go in the basement. They had to avoid him completely and quarantine for at least 2 weeks. Uh, yeah. So as far as I can remember, that's the only person I know who's caught the virus.
That's really interesting that you know somebody who has a point of view that's not from the United States. That's a cool thing to talk about, I guess, but also unfortunate at the same time. Um, this is a little more like political, so you don't necessarily have to answer this. But how do you feel about well, it shouldn't be political, but how do you feel about wearing a mask?
A mask is necessary. A mask should be worn, and not necessarily even if you're a younger person who's in great health, not necessarily for you, but for other people. Going back to what I said earlier, is it's definitely a reflection of your morals. Just because you have the right not to do it doesn't mean you should. Some people need that protection, so it's your responsibility as an American who has their freedom to protect others, even though you don't have to.
Yeah, I think that really sums up the whole debate that we're having for some apparent reason. Um, a little kind of shifting a little bit back towards the school. I know that you are getting close to graduating, so are you optimistic about finding a job after you graduate?
So I'm so currently I'm looking into museums as maybe my primary career path. Um, and I know the museum field is being drastically changed by the Black Lives Matter movements and the pandemic itself. There's a lot of change in these institutions that are calling for restitution of artifacts and just to really get away from the traditional ideas of what a museum is and trying to be more progressive to include more voices that might have been silenced or ignored. So in terms of these changes, I'm hopeful that they're going to start searching for students who are a little less traditional, a little more open minded. I think, um, and maybe in that way, I'll get into a good grad school, and that'll set me on course to get a job, uh, trying to change what these institutions once were to reflect more of who we are now. So I am hopeful that I'll find something. That being said, that doesn't mean I'm not concerned about my situation, but I'm optimistic.
Yeah, I never thought about the effects on that field of like that career path would have with um, the social justice movements and the pandemic that's happening now. Like I never thought about that. I wish you the best of luck, man.
Yeah, yeah, lots changing, but
Yeah,
hopefully there's opportunity.
I'm sure they will be. But do you think that things will ever like return back to quote unquote normal, like the way things were before?
I wanna be hopeful and say yes, but I know in reality that that will not be the case. I think this is something that has changed. Like focusing on our nation, it's changed our nation in ways that I don't think could ever be reversed. I think a lot of these are going to remain. A lot of these changes are going to remain for a long time. If not, they're going to be permanent. Um, so I mean, some of them, it's gonna be hard, especially if there's no vaccine. It's going to be hard to kind of adjust to this as a new reality. But I think, at least me personally, um, I'm starting to get used to it, and I'm trying to from what used to be, and trying to focus on what can be in the future. Um, I just think it's really hard to focus on what we had and what was taken away because of the pandemic. It makes it harder to kind of go through your day, I think. So
Yeah, it's difficult to think about everything that's changed, I guess. But yeah, I know we've kind of touched on this before, so I'll just make this kind of brief. But do you see COVID-19 having a lasting effects on your future, not just like career path, but like socially and how you're going to live the rest of your life?
Yeah, I do. I think a lot of the career paths that I've been looking at, uh, like I said, are changing for the better. And in some cases, it just has to change. For example, I know certain museums are now using virtual tours to bring in people and pass on information that people want to get engaged with. So those are jobs that are likely to remain and not go away because people are getting used to this now. People are going to want to do that rather than actually go to a museum. So yeah, a lot of this is going to change, and I mean, for the most part, I'm okay with it. I think there are a lot of good changes, um, and I'm hopeful I'll be able to fit in there somewhere and make a career out of it.
I think I just have a couple more questions left, but going more into like what you did during quarantine, like how was your quarantine experience? Like, what did you do, kind of thing, stuff like that.
My quarantine, I personally rather enjoyed my quarantine experience. Um, Going out to school, while in-person classes, I much prefer. In terms of like a social life, I don't necessarily have one. Being a dual major and being in honors, I dedicate a lot of my time to work, and in between there, I'm either sleeping or eating. So for the most part, I wasn't really impacted socially too much. I did have a few friends that it's harder to see now because of quarantine and the pandemic, but we still keep in touch. So I haven't really lost any friends. Um, but like I said, I did enjoy it. Um, not many complaints other than not being able to go out and um, shop or anything like that. It's really hard to, be at home all day.
Yeah, I definitely have similar feelings about that. But um, has this time away from like normal life, like you put in normal in quotations, but changed anything about your life? Like, has it given you new perspective about certain things and like changed like how you think? Kind of that's what I'm trying to get at, I guess.
I, in terms of how politicized this whole thing's gotten, it's definitely at least reinforcing me. It's changed. It's taught me to listen. A lot of people don't seem to listen anymore. They just kind of wait to respond to questions whenever they're posed to them. So I mean, the biggest takeaway I think that's kind of changed in me is to really focus on what people are saying and to kind of focus on where are they getting their information from, or what are their complaints, and are their complaints valid. um, yeah, I think that's like the biggest change with, like, for me personally, is just being attuned to the people around me and being aware of what's going on, like focusing more on that.
Yeah. So, do you have any like quarantine hobbies? Like, and if so, what were they?
Well, I've been meaning to start running. um I know my the summer of my freshman year, I walked the Camino de Santiago, which is, it's a Christian pilgrimage in Spain. You just walk 550 miles from the Pyrenees to the coastline. So I did that my freshman year, and after that, I got away from exercise because I had done so much walking. I was like, I just don't need to work out anymore. So this not having to be out at school and just kind of doing things asynchronously, it really freed up my time to pick up running and kind of get back into shape.
Yeah, I mean, I should really do that. I used to run all the time, and I have definitely experienced the freshman 15 a little bit, so I need to get back into that. Um, have you missed any important life events because of everything that's happened?
I think the biggest one for me, I mentioned earlier, I think was field school. um, that's really, at least in terms of being an archaeology major, that's really a point where you can determine if you want to do that or if you decide you want to do something else. Because you get that experience of, and this is what you're going to do for the next 40 years. Um, so I mean, not having that when I needed to have it, has really, like I said, it forced me to change a lot, change around what I plan to do with my summers. It's really forcing me to wait to see, am I doing the right thing right now, in terms of, going to college. So at, at least that's, for me, has been, I think, the biggest loss.
Yeah, I can't even like fathom how like difficult that would be. Just like one important part that I'm sure you were looking forward to just got like ripped away. But my last question is there anything else you'd like to share with me?
I mean, I for the most part, I think I've spoken my piece on, how I feel politically and, um, about the situation. So I think I'm good. I think you've asked all the questions, pertaining to anything I'd have to say about the pandemic.
All right, well, thank you very much.